When the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt first hit the skies, the Luftwaffe laughed. Literally, German pilots gave it nicknames like the milk bottle or the jug, bulky, awkward, and to them, laughably slow compared to their sleek Messerschmitt Bf 109 seconds and Focke-Wulf FW 190 seconds. To their eyes, this American brute wasn't a fighter, it was a flying target. Big, heavy, sluggish, not built for dogfights, and certainly not a threat to Germany's finest aces. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. That arrogance didn't last. By the time the war was in full swing, those same German pilots weren't laughing anymore. They were running, or burning, because that jug they mocked, it had 8 50 caliber machine guns. And once those guns opened up, the joke was over. The P-47 Thunderbolt's journey from punchline to powerhouse wasn't just about firepower, it was a masterclass in transformation. Its early combat debut, in April 1943, was rocky. German pilots outmaneuvered it. It struggled at low altitudes, and with its massive frame, it looked more like a bomber than a nimble dogfighter. But what the Luftwaffe didn't realize was that this aircraft wasn't built to play by their rules. It was about to change the rules entirely, because the P-47 didn't need to be elegant. It needed to be effective. And once its strengths were fully understood, once pilots started flying it the right way, it became one of the most feared weapons in the sky. Start with the guns. 8 Browning M2, 50 caliber machine guns, 4 on each wing, capable of unleashing thousands of rounds in seconds. It didn't nibble at enemy fighters. It shredded them. One burst could rip a plane in half. Those guns had range, volume, and reliability. Unlike cannon-armed aircraft that ran out of ammo quickly, the P-47 could sustain fire long enough to turn a dogfight into a slaughter. And that wasn't just theory. That was real-world carnage. Luftwaffe pilots who once taunted the Thunderbolt quickly learned to fear its approach. In the hands of American pilots trained in high-speed, high-altitude boom and zoom tactics, the Thunderbolt was unstoppable. It didn't dance with enemy fighters, it dove down from above, guns blazing, then rocketed back up before anyone could respond. That was the strategy: hit fast, hit hard, get out. The Thunderbolt couldn't outturn a Bf 109, but it could outclimb it, outdive it, outlast it. And with the turbo-supercharged engine, it performed best at high altitude, right where American bombers needed escort the most. Suddenly, those heavy bombers flying over Germany weren't alone. The P-47s were there, and they were angry. Durability was another factor the Luftwaffe didn't account for. German fighters were agile, yes, but fragile. One burst from a Thunderbolt's 50s could down them. The P-47, by contrast, was a flying tank. It had armor plating, self-sealing fuel tanks, a rugged airframe that could soak up unimaginable damage and keep flying. Case in point, pilot Robert Johnson. His Thunderbolt took over 200 hits in a single battle. Holes riddled the fuselage. Oil sprayed across the canopy. One of the German pilots tried to finish him off with repeated bursts at point-blank range, and still, Johnson flew home. That kind of resilience became legendary. Stories like Johnson's weren't rare. P-47s came back with wings hanging off, tails blown apart, fuselages torn open, and they still landed. That gave pilots confidence. You could take hits, make it out, live to fight again. In a war where survival was often a coin flip, the Thunderbolt gave you better odds. It didn't stop at air-to-air combat. As the war progressed, the P-47 evolved into a ground attack monster. Rockets, bombs, machine guns, it carried all of it. Armed with 10 5-inch rockets or a 2,500-pound bomb load, it turned into flying artillery. Columns of German tanks, trucks, and trains didn't stand a chance. Thunderbolts would swoop down and light up entire convoys. The Luftwaffe tried to counter it. They threw everything they had: fighters, flak, even the revolutionary Me-262 jet. But the P-47s adapted. Their tactics evolved, their numbers increased, and the Americans kept building more. That was another turning point: production. Over 15,000 Thunderbolts were built. Assembly lines didn't stop. German pilots could down one, sure, but 5 more would be flying in behind it. The Luftwaffe couldn't keep up. Their best pilots were being lost faster than they could be replaced. Their aircraft production was being bombed daily. Meanwhile, the US was pumping out aircraft. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Like clockwork. And with every new wave of P-47s, tactics got sharper, strategies got smarter. The skies tilted toward the Allies. The Germans eventually admitted it. They underestimated the Thunderbolt, dismissed it too early. Their intelligence failed to recognize what it was really designed for: mass-produced destruction. And that's what the P-47 delivered: relentless pressure, high-altitude escorts, deadly ground attacks, survivability, firepower, speed. In both Europe and the Pacific, the story was the same. Wherever the P-47 flew, it dominated. Whether strafing Japanese positions or escorting bombers over Berlin, the Thunderbolt made its presence felt. And it didn't stop evolving. Variants like the P-47D-22 and the later P-47M added improvements in speed, handling, and payload. Each upgrade built on the last. But at its core, the Thunderbolt was always the same beast: overbuilt, overpowered, and underappreciated until it opened fire. Its impact was so profound that even after the war, former German pilots openly admitted their mistake. What they once mocked had become one of the key reasons for their defeat. And American veterans who flew it never forgot what it gave them: the ability to fight back, strike hard, and come home. The P-47 wasn't beautiful. It wasn't elegant. But it didn't need to be. It was engineered for war. It was a machine built to survive, to dominate, and to punish. Its legacy wasn't just in the stats, though those were impressive. It was in the way it flipped the narrative. How it went from being laughed at to being feared. How it taught the enemy a lesson: never underestimate American engineering, and never mock a jug until it rains lead on you. If you didn't know about the P-47 before, now you do. And if you're into stories where underdogs don't just survive, but absolutely steamroll the opposition, this one's hard to beat. Drop a comment below what surprised you most about the Thunderbolt. Share this if you know someone who thinks firepower and toughness can't coexist in one aircraft. Hit like. And if you want more overlooked war machines that changed history when no one saw them coming, subscribe. We've got plenty more where that came from. What really made the P-47 Thunderbolt different wasn't just its brute strength or sky-splitting firepower, it was that it represented a shift in philosophy. This wasn't some sleek, fragile racer with a delicate engine and tight tolerances. It was an airborne anvil, forged in American factories and stamped with a very clear message: this war was going to be won with overwhelming force, not finesse. Early on, German pilots couldn't believe this was the best the US had to offer. From their perspective, the Thunderbolt was the opposite of everything they valued in a fighter: agility, grace, precision. But they were thinking in the wrong war. The P-47 didn't care about elegance. It was built for a different kind of fight. And the moment the Allies figured out how to use it properly, it became a problem Germany couldn't solve. The Thunderbolt's rise to dominance wasn't instantaneous. Its first missions exposed flaws: clunky handling at low altitude, limited range, poor visibility in certain models. But this wasn't a static design. The Americans adapted fast. Engineers reworked the cockpit. Pilots refined tactics. Longer-range drop tanks were introduced. Suddenly, that short-legged fighter could escort bombers deeper into enemy territory. With the turbo-supercharged Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine and new paddle blade propellers, its performance at altitude soared. Now, it was not just a fighter, it was a high-altitude killer. And with the right tactics, it became a nightmare. The boom and zoom strategy was tailor-made for the Thunderbolt. Dive from altitude, let those 8.50 cals spit fury, then climb back out before the enemy could counter. The Germans were used to tight turning engagements. They weren't prepared for a hulking machine to come crashing down out of the clouds at 400 miles per hour, emptying a wall of lead into their cockpit before vanishing upward. They tried to adapt. Some attempted to outturn the Thunderbolt, which usually worked until it didn't. Because the Jug didn't have to turn. It wasn't there to dogfight on German terms. It was there to erase targets before they had time to react. The Luftwaffe was fighting yesterday's war. The Thunderbolt was fighting the next one. And what really tipped the balance? The numbers. Germany simply couldn't keep up. With Allied bombers smashing German industry daily and American factories running around the clock, the flow of fresh Thunderbolts never stopped. While German pilots were conserving ammo and fuel, hoping for a clean shot, American squadrons were blanketing the skies in overlapping waves. The Luftwaffe was shrinking. The Thunderbolt was multiplying. By 1944, the Thunderbolt wasn't just flying escort, it was dictating the air war. It neutralized airfields, strafed convoys, bombed infrastructure. It didn't just protect bombers, it cleared the way. Even hardened targets felt the impact. With 5-inch rockets under its wings and the ability to carry up to 2,500 pounds of bombs, the P-47 turned into a one-plane wrecking crew. And the ground attack role? That's where the Thunderbolt truly cemented its legend. While faster, sleeker fighters struggled to survive flak and small arms fire during low-level passes, the Thunderbolt soaked it up and kept going. German tanks, trucks, and infantry soon learned to dread the low rumble of a Jug diving out of the sky. It wasn't just strafing, it was obliteration. Veteran pilots described the P-47's attack runs like nothing else. Entire trains were ripped apart. Anti-aircraft batteries silenced in seconds. Bridges reduced to twisted metal, all without the fragile sensitivity of a lighter fighter. You could hammer a Thunderbolt with small arms, hit it with shrapnel, and it would still deliver its payload and come back for more. That kind of battlefield presence had a psychological impact, not just tactical. The Germans noticed. In intercepted communications, they began referring to the P-47 with respect. Some Luftwaffe pilots reportedly warned rookies not to engage Thunderbolts unless absolutely necessary. The initial laughter had turned to silence, then to fear, because unlike the earlier warbirds, the Thunderbolt didn't back off. It didn't retreat. It hunted, and it survived. Even the introduction of Germany's futuristic Messerschmitt Me-262 jet couldn't fully neutralize the Thunderbolt's dominance. Sure, the Me-262 was faster, but it was vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Thunderbolt pilots learned to loiter near known jet bases, striking jets as they came in low and slow. That was the kind of tactical adaptation that defined the Allied air effort, and the P-47 was always at the center of it. Its presence wasn't limited to Europe, either. In the Pacific, the Thunderbolt showed its versatility again, engaging Japanese fighters and providing vital ground support in harsh conditions. Its rugged design proved invaluable in tropical climates and makeshift airfields. Once again, earned a reputation not just as a fighter, but as a force. The production numbers told their own story. Over 15,000 Thunderbolts rolled off the lines. The aircraft evolved rapidly, with new variants like the P-47D becoming the backbone of Allied fighter forces, and later models like the P-47M pushing performance even further. But across all versions, the core idea stayed the same: power, protection, and punishment. And it worked. By the end of the war, the P-47 had destroyed thousands of enemy aircraft, not to mention tens of thousands of ground targets. It had outlived initial doubts, outperformed early rivals, and outlasted countless assaults. It was, by every definition, a success story built on American engineering, pilot ingenuity, and industrial might. The Germans had laughed at first, but by 1945, their skies were filled with the roar of Thunderbolts and the silence of their own destroyed airfields. Even post-war assessments praised the P-47. Pilots who flew it swore by its toughness. Historians noted its contribution not just to air superiority, but to the collapse of German ground operations. Former enemies admitted its effectiveness. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't pretty, but it was terrifyingly good at its job. The legacy of the P-47 is one of brute function turned into strategic brilliance. It's a lesson in underestimation. An aircraft dismissed as a failure became the spearhead of a relentless, overwhelming, and ultimately victorious air campaign. It wasn't just a fighter, it was a symbol of American production power, tactical flexibility, and raw resolve. The kind of machine that doesn't need to be the fastest or the sleekest, just the last one flying. Let's be clear, this thing was massive. At over 17,000 pounds when fully loaded, the P-47 was the heaviest single-engine fighter of the war. It was larger than some light bombers. For comparison, a nimble Spitfire looked like a kite next to it. But here's the catch: size wasn't a weakness. Before long, those lumbering B-17s flying into German airspace weren't flying alone anymore. The Thunderbolts were right there with them, soaring high, scanning the horizon, and lighting up anything that got too close. Luftwaffe pilots, once confident that American escorts couldn't keep up or reach altitude, suddenly found themselves under fire from a plane they thought they could ignore. And once the Thunderbolt was in range, the fight was over fast. The P-47 didn't nip at enemies. It hit like a hammer. Those 8.50 caliber Brownings weren't just for show. They chewed through armor, tore wings apart, shattered cockpits. This wasn't speculative fire, it was deliberate destruction. The Jug didn't win by luck. It won by volume. And then, as if air-to-air dominance wasn't enough, it dropped low and started demolishing the ground war. By mid-1944, Thunderbolts were being equipped with bombs and rockets, turning them into deadly close air support machines. They'd come screaming down onto German convoys and cut through tanks like butter. Those rockets weren't precise, but they didn't need to be. In groups, the P-47s would flood the battlefield with explosives, setting entire supply columns ablaze. And after the bombing run, they still had those machine guns, ready to rake anything left standing. German troops learned to dread that sound, the distant rumble that meant a squadron of Thunderbolts was overhead. You couldn't outrun them. You couldn't outgun them. And if you didn't get to cover, you weren't making it out. Pilots trusted it with their lives, and for good reason. When flak started pounding or tracer rounds ripped through the air, the Jug could take it. There are countless accounts of Thunderbolts limping home on one wing, engines sputtering, fuselages full of holes, and still landing safely. Other fighters would have gone down. The P-47 just refused to quit. And what about the maintenance crews? They loved it. The Thunderbolt was tough, yes, but it was also practical. Easy to maintain, easy to repair. Ground crews could patch it up, load it with ammo, refuel it, and get it back in the sky faster than many of its peers. That meant higher sortie rates. That meant more missions flown. That meant more pressure on the enemy. This is where the real genius of the P-47 becomes clear. It wasn't just a great fighter, it was a sustainable one. A platform that could be mass-produced, deployed across multiple theaters, and flown by thousands of pilots with different skill levels. And it kept performing. You can't talk about that success without talking about production. Over 15,000 units produced. That number is staggering. Think about what that means during wartime. Every time a German ace brought down a Thunderbolt, 5 more rolled off the line. That kind of production power wasn't just a flex, it was a strategy. War of attrition? The P-47 was built for it. Germany never recovered from that imbalance. They couldn't match the output, couldn't rotate pilots fast enough, couldn't replace lost fighters. Every Thunderbolt that flew was another nail in the coffin for the Luftwaffe. So if you've ever underestimated something because it didn't look the part, remember the P-47. The plane that got laughed at, then outlasted, outgunned, and outflew everything in its way. Let us know in the comments what surprised you most about the Thunderbolt story. Like this, if you've got a whole new appreciation for the Jug, share it with anyone who still thinks looks matter more than performance. And if you want more stories about underdogs who flipped the battlefield upside down, hit that subscribe. We've got plenty more legends to cover.